Welcome to the Regulating AI podcast with Sanjay Puri. AI is changing the world faster than rules can keep up. So how do we protect people without killing progress? Each week, Sanjay brings you inside conversations with global leaders, policymakers, and innovators who are wrestling with that exact question. So if you're curious about the future of technology and how it's governed, you're in the right place.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. And welcome to the Power, Participation and Algorithm. It's the AI Governance for the People, a side event at the OGP Global Summit here in Victoria. I'm Sanjay Puri. I'm the President of Regulating AI. And we are totally honored to be co-hosting this session with Club de Madrid. And I really want to thank all the folks at Club de Madrid who worked very, very hard to put this thing together. Just want to give you a little perspective what the next 90 minutes are going to be like. We're going to do three things basically. We will name the democratic states of AI now, where algorithms are already shaping welfare, health, policing, elections. Number two, we are going to shift from principles to practice. So how do we embed oversight, accountability, participation, and rights into AI systems? And finally, a roadmap, not just a panel, but towards a democratic AI governance framework that aligns with open government values and continues beyond this summit. And here's basically the format of the afternoon. You'll hear cross-sector views from former heads of government, academia, government practitioners, civil society, and part of the OGP. And we'll run two fast rounds of discussions, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, and then some crisp takeaways in a concrete next step. Our round number one will be focused on safeguards and trust. What immediate guardrails are needed in public sector AI right now? And round two will be participation and power. How to include citizens, youth, meaningfully, and how to keep institutions accountable while enabling innovation. So, and also then we'd love to hear questions from you, concise, solution-oriented. And then finally, 2 and 3 closing commitments. With that, let me welcome our truly esteemed panelists. I'll welcome Prime Minister Mehdi Jomaa. He's a member of Club de Madrid and former Prime Minister of Tunisia. Also want to welcome Yvonne Wamucii. She's the Program Secretary, Official Special Programs, Presidency of Kenya, and she's also part of CDM's wide network. And I want to welcome Augusta Nnadi. She's a Special Advisor, Strategy and Communications for Southeast Development and Commission, Federal Republic of Nigeria, and also part of CDM's wide network. And Alex Walsh. He's the Associate Director of the Center for the Governance of Change for IE University. And then Tim Hughes, Democracy and Participation Lead for the Open Government Partnership. I hope I got all the names right, all the titles right. If not, please let us know and we'll make sure of that. We'll begin with you, Tim. Since you're with OGP and we want to defer and thank you for hosting us. Tim, what safeguards are most needed in your view to maintain and build civic trust in AI-enabled decision-making?
Well, thank you very much for having me, and thank you first of all to Regulating AI and Club de Madrid for organising this side event. We're so excited to see everybody here for the OGP Summit. So at OGP, our approach to kind of algorithms, AI, is that of course they offer such tremendous benefit to society, but unless we think really seriously about their governance, they also offer the potential for tremendous harms to society as well. And particularly when we think around what's needed to kind of drive forward innovation around algorithms and AI, often we look to resources like data, skills and capacity, but actually public trust is one of the most vital resources that we need to maintain through this process. So we actually have a resource that OGP develops to support our members when they're developing reforms around issues like algorithmic transparency and openness, called the Open Gov Guide. It covers lots of other topics as well, but includes a number of recommendations around reforms, safeguards that governments and civil society can introduce to ensure that algorithms and AI are governed in the public interest. So I thought I'd talk through just a few of those, a few that I've picked out I think is potentially important, but please do have a look for the full list. I think it's important in this conversation to think about some of the kind of underlying protections that are needed as well. So not just immediately jumping to thinking around AI and algorithms, but actually some of the data governance that's needed to be in place to begin with. So of course, having that foundational level of a strong legal framework for data protection is absolutely fundamental through all of this. And I think we need to remember that that element needs to be essential at the foundation. On top of that, then we can layer other reforms, and particularly when we're thinking about the open government principles of transparency, participation and accountability, a few reforms that link to transparency are things like requiring data processing reports, creating registers of algorithmic use by government, requiring notifications of when decisions are kind of subject to the use of automated decision making or algorithms as well. So having that first kind of fundamental pillar of transparency around who and kind of when algorithms and AI is being used, particularly in the public sector. Then the second level, or the second kind of set of instruments in relation to participation, we can think about, of course, involving the people who are subject to those algorithms in their design, ensuring that actually up front in the process we're thinking about the potential harms that they might cause and ways that we can mitigate them, but also thinking about actually what is the public interest in this, and not just taking that for granted, but actually having the public involved in that conversation. We can think about having the opportunity for regular audits and also public complaint mechanisms to make sure that when issues do arise, there is redress and opportunities for the public to be able to kind of call attention to that. And then finally, the kind of pillar of accountability. There are reforms and kind of government structures around ensuring that there are regular impact assessments produced. And this is something that Canada committed to actually via OGP a few years back. Again, having redress mechanisms in place, so there's that accountability chain as well. And these are all different reform areas that a number of governments and civil society have contributed reforms to via OGP already. And actually, on the panel today, we have a number of countries that have made commitments exactly on these issues. It's fantastic to see colleagues from those countries, and I'll say a bit more about that perhaps later.
Well, that's very helpful. You've been busy with many panels. Yvonne, we'll turn to you. Tell us, how can governments ensure meaningful citizen participation, especially from marginalized and excluded groups in the design and monitoring of AI systems?
Okay, first and foremost, I want to thank you for having me. And I'm speaking as a young person coming from a country that is very open to AI. Kenya is seeking to not only take part in the growing AI, but also be a pacesetter in the whole of Africa when it comes to AI. But we are having so many challenges, and in my context, the marginalized people in my country are usually youth, women, and of course the people living with disability. Because we find that in most cases when we are coming up with systems and when we are building systems, they tend not to be involved during the initial stages of that, or rather during the participation, or rather when we are coming up with the AI systems. So one of the things that we really want governments to look into is the inclusive participation when we're building frameworks. AI is a little bit complicated if you don't break it down to people in languages that they do understand. So in my context, I would really want us to also look at translating languages and having people communicate in languages that people understand. And also, let's talk to people about things that they interact with directly. If it is farmers, let's talk to them about the systems that are actually affecting them during their farming and in making sure that they are getting the smart farms and all that. If it is health systems, we want to talk to people on the benefits of using AI in health so that they understand from the very grassroots on how this AI is going to affect them. We had an issue, I remember, in one of the villages in my country where we had a medical camp, and they had this robot that was used to like take samples and scan people for cervical cancer. No, it was not cervical cancer. It was, I think, it was a robot basically, and we had a lot of issues because people were feeling that they're kind of used to human interaction, and now when you bring in something that is kind of strange to them, then we experience a lot of resistance from the people. So I feel like when we go to the grassroots, it's good to talk to people in a language that they understand. Another thing we could do is when we are coming up with AI systems, let's co-design together. In most cases, you find that you bring the marginalized people at the very tail end, and you tend to forget to bring them on the table when we are at the very beginning. So I would urge governments to bring everybody on board from the onset. If we are building something, let's bring everybody on the table from the first day. Because it is easy to give somebody something that they have taken part in building, rather than building something and then you give people to consume. Yeah, another thing I would really push for governments to do is be transparent and accountable when it comes to these systems, because if we understand something, then we will not critique it, we will not fight it. But if something is forced to us and we really don't understand how it impacts our lives, then it becomes very difficult for you to take it in. So when it comes to systems, building policies, using it during in public, like now, when you use AI in public service, it's good to make people understand the efficiency that comes with that, so that you face minimal resistance from the people. And I believe when we understand what is being given to us, then it becomes very easy for us to take part and walk the journey together. And maybe lastly, I could mention about capacity building, because we have very many people that come from places that I'd say they're not literate, and it's difficult to tell them something that they do not understand. So we need to invest, we need to come together as civil society, we need to come together as government, we need to come together as organizations that are pro-AI to make sure that we build capacity to people from all levels of education, from the people in the villages to people that have not interacted with a computer. We need to sit down with them and take them through things at their level. Yeah, thank you.
That's two great points you made. Many others, but bring everybody on board right at the beginning, and capacity building. Augusta, turning to you, in contexts where citizens are skeptical of institutions, and there are a lot these days, how can strategic communication and narrative, framing help prevent misinformation about AI and build trust in democratic governance? Because trust is pretty low right now.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Like you said, trust is pretty low in government institutions. But funny enough, in Nigeria, when governments release press statements and documents, you find that people tend to ask the AI if those things are true. Funny enough. So you see that people actually do trust AI more than government, which in a way puts us in a sort of unique position. So what I would say is, for the policy making process, when you're talking about strategic communications as it relates to policy making, you cannot remove the human out of it. So if you're talking about framing AI as a sort of, or to combat misinformation that AI may give out, it's a partnership. So the government cannot remove the AI, and they also cannot remove the human face. Let me give an example. So say for instance now we want to make a policy on, say, elections. There's going to be extensive stakeholder engagement. The extensive stakeholder engagement is simply so people can claim ownership to whatever policy document is put out at the end. This allows people to see the process, it makes the process transparent, and it allows people to see how the policy was crafted from beginning till the end. Where AI comes in is, after all these ideas are collected, the AI can now refine it and can be used as a monitoring and evaluation tool. This way, people can see AI and say, or rather, people can see the policy and say, oh yes, I was part of this policy, I was part of that policy. And even when you're hearing that the AI tool was involved or an AI tool is used for the monitoring and evaluation, you still have a sort of ownership for that. So it allows you. Sorry, I think my mic is. Thank you. So it allows you to sort of help people build trust, first in the government, because like I said, people trust AI in the government. First in the government, when they see that these policies we've done very transparently, and also in the AI. So one of the things now that my office is doing, that's the Southeast Development Commission, is we've done an extensive stakeholder engagement in terms of infrastructure development, asking people, what do you need at this particular point and how is it going to impact on you? So when we're done with all of this, what we did was we built a tool that allowed people to now monitor the deployment of those projects in real time. So that was an AI tool. So you will see where people now come and ask the AI, is this happening, is this happening, and it gives us real-time data, because real-time updates rather, because at the end of the day, AI works based on the data you feed it. So if you feed it the correct information, and that's the responsibility of government or whoever it is that wants to deploy AI. If you feed it accurate data, accurate information, and do your stakeholder engagement extensively, I think it solves that trust issue. Thank you.
She said people in Nigeria trust AI more than the government. Wow. That's that is something to seriously think about. While we're thinking about that, let's go to Alex. Alex, from an academic standpoint, how can universities, research centers contribute to building not just technical expertise here? They teach a lot of great people, but also ethical, civic, and democratic literacy around AI, so that the future leaders and citizens can actually participate in governance. These might not be the sexiest courses for people to take. They want to take machine learning and those kinds of things, but these are also need to be kind of woven in. What is your perspective on this, Alex?
Sure. Thank you for the question, and thank you to Regulating AI and to Nnadi for inviting me to join this panel. I'm very happy to be here. So I am Associate Director at the Center for Governance of Change. We are an applied research and educational institution based at AI University in Madrid, and we study the impact of emerging and disruptive technologies on society, on political systems, on the economy and sustainability, international peace and security. And so we coordinate research projects, and we also put together tailor-made executive education courses for high-level public and private decision makers. So I want to talk a little bit about some examples so you can understand how we try to have an impact on policy. We try to have a positive impact. We try to make decision makers, and not only decision makers, but the wider public understand where technology is going and what we can do right now as decision makers, but also as citizens to shape the kind of technology that we want for society. So for a number of years, we've been collaborating with Microsoft on a number of projects all around how technology can support democracy affirming, how technology can support democracy. So how we can develop democracy affirming technology. So this started back in 2021 in the framework of the Summit for Democracy that President Biden spearheaded. And we organized venture days, sort of like startup competitions all around the world to identify some of the best entrepreneurs using technologies such as AI, digital technologies, etc., to promote democratic participation, to promote privacy, to promote transparency. And since then, we've continued working along these paths. We've had a project called AI for Democracy, which focused more on how AI can support democracy, can support the security of elections, can support participatory decision making, public participation. That was mostly a research project, and we are continuing right now with another research project called AI for Democratic Prosperity. And what we want to do is understand how now, in the age of AI, we can use this technology to promote societies that are stronger economically, but also politically, more cohesive, and see how those two tracks can go together and whether they influence each other. We've had also other more applied research projects working with cities in Latin America with the Inter-American Development Bank, and the director of that project is actually coming to the summit, and we're putting together an event tomorrow that I invite you to join on AI, participatory governance of AI. And then we are also currently running a project with the European Commission, trying to understand how the civil servant of the future can use AI to make public service delivery more efficient. And then we also, as I mentioned earlier, put together executive education programs for leaders in companies that want to understand how technology is transforming society, also for high-level decision makers in international organizations. We put together projects for executive education programs for the UN, etc. And lastly, we participate. I think it's very important to have events like this one, in which people from government, from civil society, academia, experts share insights with the public.
So just to quickly, just briefly follow up, should it be mandatory for, let's say, when you're doing an undergrad in AI, machine learning, or computer science, or a graduate degree in Stanford or Oxford or wherever, to have a course on AI ethics or governance?
I believe so. I think if you study anything that has to do with technology, AI, machine learning, large language models, what have you, you should also understand the impact of that technology, and not only focus on the technical aspects, but also on the societal reach and impact at a wider level.
Great. Well, we'll turn to obviously Prime Minister. Prime Minister, with your background, AI is cross-border. It doesn't seem, you've heard what's happening with kids in Nigeria, what's happening around the world. How can democracies cooperate internationally to, establish shared norms and standards? And we are kind of living in a world where countries are moving inwards, not outwards. So how do you kind of propose, and is that important?
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you to discuss such a technical issue, artificial intelligence, because why I'm saying technical, because from my background, when I was in another life, I was working for the aerospace industry, and we started with the neural network. That's the father of artificial intelligence. It's beautiful to call it artificial intelligence. And at that time, it was really an engineering issue. Even inside the company, it was not understood by everyone. And then, now, it's more than technical. Yes, it's still technical. It's part of many clever people working on that, engineers, doctors, to develop these algorithms. But it's now a social, a political, and no more a company or a local, it's a global question. And I think that today we are at the stage or at the step or at the level to lead another big revolution. We are quitting or at the end of the digital revolution, and we saw how quick it was compared with the previous, like the industrial revolution. And this one will be more transformative and more quicker. And really it's impacting all the sides and all aspects of life. It's not only technical, not only tools, it's impacting our style of life, our way of life, our work, our way to work. So to summarize, for me, it's a premium political question, more than a technical now, since it affects all these aspects of life. And it's global, and your question is really pertinent because today we know that we have this, when it's global, how to manage these interfaces or border compliance, how we will deal with that in a period which is difficult because we know we are under pressure and stressing all the organizations that we get after the Second World, like UN, UNESCO, many organizations. At the meantime, we need really a large and wide collaboration between countries, region, and different spheres of that. So it's mandatory, it's one of the biggest challenge. We know that we have to manage that across. We don't dream, we know that we will not have unique rules, unique standards for everyone, but it's not a problem. If we can manage these different standards, we need rules, we need standards to avoid this, it's more than a tool, this technology or this new way to use technology to have negative impacts. And even with the digital, we saw that it was a big opportunity to progress, but in the meantime, it brought some disadvantage. And when we speak about democracy, let's speak at least about election. We know in many countries it has, with the disinformation, with the fake news, and many companies said, I can speak about our own experience in our nation democracy in Tunisia. In the last elections, in the competition, the digital tools were more used for fake news to attack than to share programs and vision, which is a problem. But we will not neglect that because of that. We have to pay attention and to say how to put and to fix all of that with a frame of rules that we have to respect. So, coming back now to the problem between countries and area, I think we have to regulate. We have a minimum to regulate between countries, but we have to be sure and to work on the consistency of this regulation. Let's take the example. For me, it's like the passport. Each country has its specificity and has its passport, but each recognizes it's a trustee to exchange. That's, on my sense, the configuration that we can imagine. But it's founded on the respect, on fundamentals, the respect of human, the respect of citizens, the accountability, the transparency, the fundamentals of democratic rules that we have each one to respect, taking into account our specificities, but we have to create the spaces and the platform where we can make all this consistent, flowing without problem. And it's the task and the responsibility of the democracy to pay attention to that. If we don't do that, someone else will do. And you see today the weight of these large corporate companies and the interference with the political sphere, and sometimes we don't know whether the power is under the political or under these companies. So it's a really complex one, but we have to pay attention to work on that. And for me, with the discussion, you know, I'm part of Club de Madrid, and we are more than 100 previous leaders, head of government and presidents from democracies, and we discuss this issue daily. And we are convinced that we should go through the existing platforms, even though there are challenges. We have many platforms today with some trust, because we have to create this coalition of trust. like African Union, European Union, and UNESCO, all these organizations. Let's renew them and use them as a platform to make this global consistency. And so we do believe as well that we have to put these rules to avoid that this AI be transformed on only commercial trade, profit, which is good, but it's not enough. And as well will be transformed and used to oppress or mass oppression or disinformation. And instead of that, we think that we have to respect these rules. It should be human, citizen-oriented, globally consistent, and rooted with fundamentals of human and democratic reforms. That's the most important for me. It's a big technological transformation, but it's bringing another way to see things. We speak about democracy, but even, it will create opportunity, but threats. We are reading that maybe in some business we can replace 1,000 employees by 10 and more than the artificial. How will we take profit of that and not create more cracks, more imbalances between people inside the society, but between the countries? And again, if it's not fair, if we don't think and put the garçons, how to say, the frame to avoid derivative, it would be dangerous. But let's focus on the opportunities that it creates and put this frame. And don't forget, we have to be citizen-oriented and globally consistent, respecting and building this chain or coalition of trust to be successful.
Wow. Thank you. That was pretty informative on a very, very important topic. I have some follow-ons, but I'll come back to you. Tim, just following on some of the things you talked about, from your perspective at OGP, how can open government reforms and multi-stakeholder processes be used to ensure AI governance strengthens trust in democratic institutions according to your work?
So I think ultimately it comes down to one of the points that was mentioned earlier, that if change is done to people, then often that leads to reductions in trust and also the opportunity that harms and issues arise. Whereas if people are involved in that change, if that change is driven by people and their interests as well, then it's much more likely that public trust will be maintained through that process. And I thought I'd kind of illustrate this with actually a few commitments that countries have made through OGP to date. And for those who know OGP well, you'll know that fundamentally OGP is about action. It's about supporting government, civil society to come together to agree reforms, to really put into practice these principles of transparency, participation and accountability. Actually, I saw a colleague from Colombia at the back of the room earlier, and they've been working on this issue very recently, have made a commitment very recently through our Open Government Challenge to establish a multi-stakeholder forum for governing AI in Colombia. Similarly, in Nigeria, we have a very similar commitment of government and civil society collectively agreeing to establish a multi-stakeholder process for the governance of digital transformation in Nigeria, ensuring that the right people are at the table to make sure that that process is happening in everyone's interest. Very similar commitments actually a year ago from Kenya in terms of their digital transformation process, again ensuring that that was done with academia at the table, civil society at the table, business at the table, all of these different stakeholder groups, ensuring that the right knowledge, the right skills, the right expertise was there to guide that process. And for all of the sorts of reforms I discussed a little bit earlier, There are examples from Canada to UK to New Zealand and others who are embedding these different mechanisms for ensuring good governance of technology, and that's kind of ultimately what we're talking about. Ensuring that these technologies, which are incredibly powerful, are governed in the way that makes the most of that potential, whilst kind of reducing the harms. So I think really significant opportunity. I think if you attend the OGP Summit this week, we've got a number of sessions tackling exactly these sorts of issues. We will hear from some of the countries themselves as well, talking about their experience of actually how open government reforms are helping to build and maintain public trust in technology and AI.
Thank you. A lot of good sessions, as I think you said, worth attending. Yvonne, coming back to you, how can, and what role can young, decision makers and civil society play in setting up governance frameworks so that these frameworks are forward-looking as well as, they are inclusive frameworks, so to speak?
Okay, first and foremost, I want to also share the sentiments of my friend Augusta. It is also in Kenya where people trust AI more than government. People will trust civil society more than government. So one of the major roles of young people right now is to create awareness, because I feel like young people I come from a country where like 55% of the population is young people, and they are the highest consumers of AI systems. And so I feel they have a role to play when it comes to digital literacy. I personally teach my mother everything on her phone. And she gets so mesmerized when I tell her, you can do this, you can check this, you can look at your phone and it's gonna tell you how long you walked, because sometimes she'll come home and she'll be stressed. The doctor says I need to walk for 2 kilometers every day, and I don't know how to check. Then I'm like, open your phone, let me show you. You could actually follow your steps on your phone, and she gets mesmerized. You think the sun came down. So I think one of the major roles we have as young people is to create digital literacy. It's unfortunate that we have diverse people in our countries, and especially I speak for my country, Kenya. We have people that have never seen a computer in their lives. So we still have a long way to go when it comes to bridging the gap between the digital literacy and also creating awareness on the AI and the systems that we are creating, and also the policies that we are creating around AI. It is difficult for you to talk about AI to someone that is not digital literate. And through these now, the government has come up with a lot of programs that are trying to get as many people as possible to be digitally literate. We have creation of digital hubs that are being set up in every constituency. So this ensures that every person in every part of the country has a touch of what digital literacy really means. And for our government systems, we used to have people walking into government offices to get services. But 2 years ago, our government went digital. So for you to get any government service, you need to actually interact with a computer. So through that, it has forcefully, or rather pushed everybody to being literate, or rather interacting with someone who helps them get services from government through the digital system. So I feel like that is something that the young people, being the people that are very aggressive when it comes to technology, it's an assignment we have as young people to make sure that everybody else behind us is able to interact and learn more on everything that they need to know in the digital space. The other thing would be the ethical oversight. We have so many tools in AI that are used even in monitoring and evaluation, as she said. When it comes to even public service and service delivery in government, we can create tools through the partnership of young people and the civil society to basically audit what the government is doing. And when we audit what the government is doing through an independent body, that is the civil society and the young people, then we gain trust from the public, because we've had a situation before where government comes up with projects, then it's still the same government that comes back to us to tell us the success levels of those projects. It becomes difficult for me to create something, then self-audit myself. So when we come together as young people and civil society, technocrats, and create systems that actually audit what government is doing, it becomes easy for us to actually measure and even see if whatever policies that are being put in place by government are able to impact in our lives directly. Another thing I'd say is partnerships and collaborations, which I think is very key, especially for us who come from countries that are still developing. The collaborations and partnerships from developing countries goes a long way. We've had organizations like Microsoft, the Ford Foundation, give donations even for computers that are specifically sent to regions that are marginalized. So some of these collaborations and working together has also seen a lot of impact in those marginalized areas and areas that if they depended on the government, it would take longer for them to see the positive impact. So we really appreciate, and part of the collaborations is what we are having right now, because for us to get here, of course it has taken a lot of collaborations from Club de Madrid, from Regulating AI, to make sure that we are on the table and that we go back home with more knowledge and more ideas on how to make things work better. Yeah, so thank you so much.
You know, I can't resist asking, you mentioned in your country also, young people trust AI. Maybe it's a global south phenomenon, it's a young, the population is very young. What does it say about the government and what these young people are trusting AI, which is kind of controlled by 5 companies in the world. That information is kind of controlled by them. So that's something for us to seriously ponder about. But while we ponder about that, let me ask Augusta, how can AI governance frameworks integrate communication strategies that can counter disinformation and polarization, ensuring that citizens are receiving accurate and trustworthy information? It's kind of a follow-on to what I'm kind of getting at.
Yes, it is a follow-up. Okay, so like I said earlier, AI depends on the data that you feed it. So regardless of how intelligent a system is, if you don't feed it the correct information, then it's prone to producing wrong information. So it's now the responsibility of government in this situation to make sure that accurate information is always available. If people have access to accurate information, and say for whatever reason they choose to ask Grok, they choose to ask ChatGPT, they choose to ask Gemini has access to those accurate information. So where we start having misinformation, more often than not, is when government gives little to no information about particular situations. Then you tend to see civil societies, political activists, or people that might not necessarily have the best interest put out all sorts of information. All AI will do is to scan and produce what it sees on the internet. So how we can combat that, like I said, is if we can provide accurate information, timely accurate information. I'll give you examples. In Nigeria, I don't know if you know this, next year is going to be campaign year in preparation for the 2027 elections. Now we've already started seeing a lot of prominent people come out to establish that they want to run for elections, and of course, AI is a tool in the hands of these people. You see false pictures, you see funny stories coming out and all of that. And what tends to happen is that if you leave these things, if you're silent about this misinformation, people take it as truth. Because like I said, the average person is going to believe AI more than government. But if you see a wrong information about yourself and you come out with fact, evidence, and say, oh, this is the timestamp, I wasn't here, I wasn't there, and bring up accurate information, then people are logical human beings at the end of the day, and they will believe you. So it just depends. If government want to, or rather, if we want to, because I'm part of government, if we want to combat misinformation, we must put out accurate information in a timely manner. It's very important that it's timely, so it doesn't feel as if you're just doing damage control. It's important that you're not reactive to things, that you preempt, that this can be misconstrued, this can be mistranslated, and you combat that. So you're giving accurate information that are clear, that are direct, and so if anybody is just going to AI is just saying this is what's happening.
So accurate information and timely information, I think, is what you're saying.
Yes, and that's actually the only way that we can build trust in government institutions. Transparency, this ties back to transparency and accountability. So even if the AI is going to audit you, it's going to audit you based on what you said you're going to do and how far you have done it. So if you say you're going to build a building and you have pictures with timestamps with real life human beings on that project site, the AI is going to come and say, yes, you're actually building it. It's not going to say you're not building it when you have timestamps and accurate information available. And even if the AI says that, human beings can come out and say, people involved in that project can come out and say, oh no, it's actually going on. So if you involve humans in the transparency process and you ask AI to audit, I think that's going to solve that problem.
Do you think it will make governments more accountable?
It's going to make government more accountable. If government know that rather than the average, because we have a Freedom of Information Act where everybody can write to the government and request documents from the government. So instead of people to go through that, this brings me back to why I said people believe AI more than government. So instead of people to go through that whole process and government keeps saying, oh, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you, they just go ask ChatGPT. But if all of this information are, say, on the government website, the AI will just pick the information from where it is and just release it to who is asking. So it cuts a lot of process. It makes government sit up, because then I know that if I don't have this information on my website and AI must answer, it's just going to answer something that's maybe off point.
That's pretty, I think, very important what you just said. Alex, from a research and innovation perspective, what governance models or regulatory experiments do you see emerging globally that could help balance, there's always this dance between innovation and democratic safeguards, or innovation and regulation, innovation and, the pull and push. What do you think, how can that be balanced?
Yeah, I can mention a few examples. So first, for example, AI regulatory sandboxes. So time-limited, controlled environments in which firms or developers can experiment with new models under regulatory supervision before these models are released to the public, to identify potential risks, develop mitigation strategies. This can be very helpful. For example, the EU AI Act includes regulatory sandboxes at the member state level. Second, AI impact assessments, I think, are important for companies developing AI models, for entrepreneurs, for innovators. Again, so it's a mandatory process before launching an AI system to identify risks from different types of natures. It can be privacy, it can be biases, etc. And mitigation strategies, so ways to address those risks. And Tim actually mentioned this earlier. Canada, since 2019, mandates that in every single instance when a federal agency is thinking about incorporating an AI model that makes decisions, takes decisions, to have an impact assessment. And this also creates an audit trail that can be taken later to make sure that things are moving the right way and things are improving. And lastly, there's also many good examples around the world of different participatory processes, citizen assemblies, mini publics, multi-stakeholder engagement processes that make sure that AI regulations have the legitimacy of public participation, that citizen values are fed into the design and the development of policies. I'll just mention one example. Brazil, when they were putting together their AI bill, had a very large participatory process in which NGOs, experts, citizens in general were able to have their say. Again, sorry for the plug, but we'll have a session on this tomorrow. We connected by data on AI governance that is participatory and deliberative.
Thank you. Prime Minister, there's a big Global South representation here in there. How can we make sure that the input or the voice of the Global South is also there in these governance frameworks to make it more inclusive? And right now, the only thing we hear is the US, EU, China, US, EU, China, US, EU, China. So what do you think, because the users are here, the producers are here, so the users, generally the customers should be dictating the voice because the customers are here. Look, they're all telling you.
Yes, no, I think if you want to speak about the Global South, the question how to do is larger than the question of artificial intelligence. That's the first remark, and then we come back to that. Secondly, I don't know if you consider artificial intelligence, if you consider China as a part of the Global South or not. And even India as well, if you consider it of the Global South or not. But let's take the same perimeter of the Global South and speak about that. I think it's a part of the transformation of the crisis of the transformation that we are living, because we are moving from a system corresponding to decades also where the world was different. We don't have the same political, literary, financial, economic powers. Now we have many emerging countries. We have certain rebellions. We have the demographic as well pressure, which is different to now here in Europe, in the United States. We are in a big demographic crisis in the meantime. In large part of Asia and Africa, we have growth of the demography. So, what we hope is that we succeed to the transition from the old world to the new world without large damageful crisis. That's the risk. If we are in the dialogue or even in a hard dialogue, like we can imagine, because the interests are big, I think artificial intelligence could be one of the tools, one of the vectors that we can use to make this transition easier. Why? Again, maybe it's a question of big investments in the data center, in energy producing, but when you see it's based as well on human resources, engineers, and development. If you take what is happening in the United States and you make a zoom, yes, it's made by United States big companies, but see the people inside. They are, a large part of them, or part of them, are coming from the Global South. So it's a big interaction, and we can use that as really an advantage, some advantage to help in this big transition. That's globally. But if we speak about the Global South, inside the Global South, we have to do things in the right way. We have to deal with the different components of this Global South to be sure that we will not create again this big gap between inside the society, but between the society, which should be based on the sharing of technology, transfer of technology, capacity building, and as well to focus all together to have the weight in what we spoke about by the beginning of our meeting, how to help to build this global regulation. And we have to do it inside the global side. Why? I said I have to do it. I'm coming from Tunisia, and I'm from the south, so I'm an advocator of the global south. It's not to create another power against another, but it's an opportunity to rebalance things and to make more integration, more inclusive global society, more inclusive country by country society. So this idea of the global side for me is a real opportunity for all of us. It will not happen in an easy way, and I hope that we will evolve worse, because if you see the history, such big changes generated wars. I think that we have enough voice today to avoid that, but it's really our task to do things well and to bring our weight and to use all these cross competences, these cross people that we have from each side to build this bridge and to build the new future together, which is fair and inclusive future for all of us.
So, a general question, kind of following up, any of you can answer, all of you can answer, is how can we have some governance frameworks that prevent this concentration of power? Because there are 5 companies. I mean, if you thought social media is concentration of power, AI is going to be, because it takes tens and tens of billions of investments which are already being made. I mean, look at the investments that close to 2 trillion in the next few years in data centers and others. But there are serious implications for that too, because we live now in a geopolitically world where this has become a geopolitical issue. So are there any frameworks that can be applied to prevent concentration of power?
Yes, you are right, because even when we listen to all the speakers, even me, we are speaking about, we suppose that the governments should do, the governments have the power, and we are coming from this organization where there was a concentration of power, but it's no more true. Today, when you see the power is more under these big firms, big companies, and behind them, even the press, the media, they have control more than the governments. And maybe in the previous time, governments were making this entrepreneur. Now, my feeling is more entrepreneurs are making governments through their influence, through their. And we see it, let's say, if you take the example of X, and even in Europe, he has political position and using his power to push on side. So today, that's the real thing that we have to think about. It's not only among countries, among governments, it's as well how this society will be organized. These companies, and we spoke about America, but even in China, the difference that in China there is some consistency and balance, or the authority of the political still enough good, so you have this political power who is organizing things and moderating that. And the real challenge is that. And I think that the users will have power. See, even in politics, now we are speaking about the Z generation. See what is happening in the world. In Nepal, they were able to transform things within 1 week. And I think that's the leverage that we have on this company. I cannot rely on any government in the global south to push these big players to change. No, it's not. But the users, yeah. So how we think to mobilize these resources to make them aware, we can be surprised on the power which was not existing, but this way of doing, these tools, this offer on the market with this new generation could create another leverage that we could not imagine before, which would be, and if there is a reflection, is in that direction, not counting on the governments, they are not all of them able, due to this influence. So, let's see.
Awesome. I can keep going, but we do want to get some questions from the audience. If we have some, otherwise I'll just keep going because I've got a zillion questions for you folks. But audience questions from any of you? Okay, I'll continue on, and if you have some, please let us know. Tim, this is really for you. I mean, we are living in, so to speak, an algorithmic governance kind of a model as we keep moving on. How can, democratic institutions, whether it's parliamentarians, regulators, watchdogs, adapt to these challenges within this kind of an algorithmic framework?
I think it's a really interesting question, and I think I'd also link it actually back to the previous question you asked, because I think one of the ways that we can think about governance of these technologies is actually expanding the toolbox that we have at our disposal, particularly from a government perspective. I think an area that we often underappreciate is the power of government procurement of technology to actually also regulate how that technology develops. So there are governments at the moment signing billions of dollars contracts with AI companies, and actually there is a huge amount of power at that point to really determine, well, first of all, who you're buying these technologies from, but then on what basis that's done, how they're going to operate, but also importantly how the data as well is kind of being transferred from governments and the public sector into the hands of private companies, because that is also handing over significantly more power to these companies. So really thinking actually kind of quite imaginatively around some of those different ways that we can have an impact on how these technologies develop. I think, of course, there's a role in building the capacity of our existing institutions to be able to regulate and kind of, first of all, understand these technologies more, but then to regulate them sensibly, so whether that be Parliament or government. But then I think we also need to look beyond that to specific oversight institutions that can bring both the technical expertise, but also, as we've been discussing, the governance and the ethics expertise as well. So we're not just leaving this in the hands of decision makers who often do not have access to all these different perspectives. I think linked to that, as we've kind of discussed quite a lot already, the role of kind of multi-stakeholder approaches to this, and not just being reliant on the old ways of making policy, the old ways of doing regulation, but as we've said, making sure different interests are at the table to be able to offer the different expertise that they bring. I think I'll leave it there.
Great. Any questions? Well, I'll give an open question and any of you can probably respond. So if we fail to get AI governance right, what do you think is the greatest risk for democracy? And if we get it right, what's the greatest benefit for building trust in institutions? Any of you?
We'll start with something. Today the problem is we know. To get the power is under the hand of who get the information. The governments are powerful because they have intelligentsia, interior, army. Now we have this company has more than the government information, so we have to pay attention to that. And I think, coming back, through the institution, through all these platforms, we have negotiated as an emergency or important issue to regulate. Otherwise, we will leave a heavy weight of this new technology on the democracy. Really, this couple of last year, so many elections, even mature or developed democracy, impact of the digital tools. All of us, we are aware of that. So you can imagine with these tools, with intelligence. I saw some demonstration in some companies. They produce a copy of your speech, of your vocal signature, and making any speech. So they can really, if it's not regulated, if it's not structured, we can go in another virtual world, which will be a big threat for democracy. On the other hand, it could be really a very good time to make citizen implied in an interactive way to express his mind, to express his opinion. It could be really for the environment. You know, we are speaking about AI as a big consumer of energy. But if you use it in the rationalization, it could be the leverage for a big economy through the smart grid, the local smart grid. We can adapt that. So many opportunities how we can organize ourselves. Today we have platforms, we have the governments, and we do believe that even though there is a big influence of these big business companies, we should tie to this democracy. We know that it's not the best time of democracy. There is many threats, and sometimes you have people saying that when you compare this authority with the democracy, but our experience now from the history, it's maybe not a perfect organization of democracy, but at least it's less bad than any other, or it's better than anything. So we have to struggle for that. It's not easy. Again, through the participation of the young people, through the participation of the minorities, of women, of all these actors, we can maybe give a bet to save the democracy from the derivatives and to use AI as an inclusive, as a large democratic integration wave or tools to succeed more in democracy.
Okay, so just also to comment on your question, at the heart of democracy are the people. You remove the people from democracy and you have a whole different system of government. Now, the danger is where governments rely heavily on AI to formulate policies and remove the people. So you go to any AI tool today and you say, how can I solve healthcare in this location? AI search for global best practice and give you a policy document. You've not gone to the place that you want to solve this issue to check what is actually the concern of the people. Is it really healthcare? Is it road? If it's healthcare, is it mortality? Is it the birth rate? What exactly? Is it HIV? So many issues. AI would just give you what it can give you. You've not gone to the people to actually ask their opinions. And what's happened is that you pick up this policy from your AI tool and you impose it on the people. So these people have been living their life all this while. What they actually need at that time is maybe an industry to create jobs, but you've gotten a healthcare policy that they don't even need. That's not democracy in any way, shape, or form. That's just you imposing a policy to them. The best case scenario is government learn to use AI as a sort of collaborating tool to refine these ideas. So after I've gone to these people, after I've asked them what exactly they need, I've created a policy that actually solves their problem, that takes into consideration who they listen to, what they need, the proposed impact. I cannot go to AI and ask, can you refine this? What's the global best practice? What are the gaps in my policy idea? How can this be better? So, apart from the industrial revolution that you may say, quote unquote, took jobs from people, other technological revolutions so far have just made people more efficient. It has not threatened the jobs of human beings before. So, for us, the developing countries, what AI can do for us is, if we're projecting to reach this amount of GDP in 50 years, with the right policies, with using AI, you can cut that time down to 10 years, 15 years, or even lower. Because now you have a tool that can look at the global best practice, do the analysis, and give you the gaps in your ideas and help you make it better in a matter of minutes. So AI is not the problem. AI is not something we should fight against. AI is not our enemy as government. AI is something that, in the hands of the right people, would solve our problems quickly. Again, it depends on the data it has. It depends on how you use it. But if you solely rely on AI, you just run a government where the machines, in this case AI, is now governing the people on your behalf. And I don't think that's anything that we want to do.
Well, that's a very important point in terms of collaboration with government, civil society across the board. Speaking of that, Alex, what risks do you foresee if the research and evidence, academic research and evidence are not adequately integrated into policy making, especially when it comes to governance from that perspective?
Mm-hmm. So I work for a research center that uses foresight methodologies. We seek to understand where the future is going, so we use foresight, or some people call it future studies. And I think this is key to avoid a big risk, which is the risk of regulatory regulation that is reactive, or governance that is reactive. So I think, unfortunately, what we've been seeing lately, and since the explosion, so to speak, of AI, is that the developers, the entrepreneurs, the inventors are going much faster than what the regulators or the policymakers can catch up with, and that's partly a problem of lack of foresight from the point of view of governance. So I think it's very important that policymakers develop scenarios and work hand in hand with people that are at the frontier of these technologies to understand the future risks and take the necessary measures right now, that so we do not arrive late to regulating some of the problems that these technologies pose.
So again, check in with anybody in the audience. Any questions? Open question for all of you. Should there be, there have been all kinds of conversations that we need a central body to kind of have a governance framework, like you have the International Atomic Energy Commission, and obviously the UN and OECD and others are there. Any thoughts that there should be a central body that kind of governs frameworks around AI?
What I know that UNESCO is trying to do this work. They are very active, and at the last session of UN, there was a large presence there of UNESCO to connect with other people, to attract them, to serve as a platform to focus on that, like an authority of regulation. But again, we know how things are today. the Security Council, with all the organizations, multilateral organizations. We're at a time where even the irritated institutions are challenged and challenged, which is pity that it's a challenge, but the creators of that which are supposed to preserve them. So the context is very difficult today, but there is many voices everywhere in the world because we are aware that we have, that's what you say, you are saying, we have to create an authority to control that. It's a problem, it's touching everywhere in the world. It's not the issue of the company or such countries, or even these big countries, because we know that China will be a big player. Whatever it happens today, maybe it's a silent player, but it will be a big player. And I got the opportunity with some colleagues from Madrid to meet President Xi Jinping in 2019. No one were speaking about artificial intelligence. He said at that time, in December 21, that we will win the technology competition, and this year we created more than 400 specialties in university in China, and you will be surprised by the power of what they are creating. But the rest of the world, we are concerned, we are involved in that, we will lead that, and we will be subjected to that. We have to get a voice. And speaking about the Global South, it's one of the challenges of the Global South is if we succeed to create, let's say, some governance institution, global institution for AI, or on what is connected to AI, is to make sure that all the nations and the population has a voice. It's a key of the success of that, not to create, again, gaps or to create tricky holes where we can fall in the future to create more tension in the world.
Well, I think we've had a fantastic conversation. I really have to thank our panelists. Several ideas that cut across, at least to me, that we have to make democratic safeguards non-negotiable. Public sector AI needs clear legal mandates. And second, participation must be power sharing, not performative. And you have to co-design with affected communities, especially youth and marginalized groups. And then you have to rebalance with openness, prevent concentration. We've talked about that, public or private. Collaboration is key. Listening to, to me, one of the big takeaways is young people are listening to AI more than to the governments. So we need open standards and interoperability reportings. So where do we go from here so that this is not just a talk fest, which is very important too. We want to create a multi-stakeholder roadmap toward a democratic AI governance frameworks that continues after the summit, and we will follow. And maybe pilot one concrete participation mechanism, like a citizens panel or an affected community review. And then finally align with some of our peers who are doing some of these sessions, and others also map our current safeguards to open government values that are done. But I do want to thank on behalf of Club de Madrid and Regulating AI. One thing I did neglect to mention is about Club de Madrid and Regulating AI, what they are for some of these people is Club de Madrid is probably the largest, as the Prime Minister said, democratic framework of over 100 Prime Ministers and Presidents focused on democracy and freedom, really. And Regulating AI is a non-profit, really focused on working and educating policymakers. We really focus in on educating policymakers around the world, because just assuming policymakers know AI is not the right assumption, because they are supposed to make policies, and if they are not aware of what these policies ramifications are, it would be not right. But I do want to thank the Prime Minister, Mehdi, Jomaa, Yvonne, Augusta, Alex, and Tim, really, and also for all the attendees for leaning in. We really like all of you to give them a big round of applause because they were very patient. And I learned a lot. So thank you so much. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Regulating AI podcast with Sanjay Puri. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you thought. Share it with someone curious about the future of AI, and join us next time for more stories and insights from the leaders shaping what's ahead. Right here on the Regulating AI podcast.